Welcome to our deep dive into the life and work of Bob Camblin. But we're going beyond just, you know, looking at his paintings. I think of this as a journey into the mind of an artist and
Yeah.
what a journey it promises to be. We're working with a really unique collection of his personal writings,
Right.
poems, philosophical notes, even scribbles on napkins.
Wow.
It's like getting a peek into his creative process as it was happening.
It's fascinating how these sort of personal glimpses complement his more formal biography, which highlights just how prolific Camblin was. His exhibition history, it spans decades
Oh,
and
yeah.
covers a really diverse range of venues.
His first exhibition was a group show called the 62nd American Exhibition at the Art Institute of Chicago in
Okay.
1957, and he even got featured in Time magazine that same year.
That's quite the start.
Uh-huh.
Early recognition from such prestigious institutions speaks volumes. But what's really interesting is how he didn't limit himself to those traditional spaces.
Right.
He also had shows in places called Joe Tate's Backyard and The Last Garage Sale.
It definitely paints a picture of an artist who followed his own path, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Almost like a restless, creative spirit, to borrow a phrase from the biography.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at his writings, you start to see that independent spirit reflected in his thoughts as well. For instance, he once wrote, "Look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both."
I see what you mean. There's a real sense of exploration there. He doesn't seem content with just one way of seeing the world. It's almost as if he's suggesting that art and understanding can be found anywhere if you're willing to look.
Mm.
It's not just about the traditional methods or venues, it's about keeping an open mind.
And his writing often has this push and pull between logic and intuition, which makes it even more intriguing. He even wrote, "I will stick with common sense and try for the perfectly average view of the universe. I think that will let me enjoy miracles on both sides of science and magic, and the nuances of the smear between the whiteness and the blackness, and hope that I can be around when the two meet in the near future and we have an intensely bright gray."
What's fascinating is how he embraces both sides, the analytical and the intuitive.
Hmm.
It makes me wonder if he saw them not as opposing forces, but as complementary aspects of a complete picture.
Yeah.
You need the structure and logic of common sense to appreciate the wonder of miracles, whether they come from science or magic.
It's a beautiful way to think about the world, isn't it?
It is.
Embracing those gray areas where seemingly opposite ideas can coexist. And he doesn't shy away from doubt either. He actually said, "The sixth sense is to be without a doubt senza dubio." No doubt.
That quote seems almost paradoxical, yet there's a deeper meaning there.
Yeah.
Perhaps he's suggesting that true understanding, that sixth sense, comes from acknowledging our limitations, from accepting that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
And that very acceptance opens us up to new possibilities, new ways of seeing.
Speaking of different ways of seeing, there's this recurring theme of impermanence and change throughout his writings. He has a great line, "Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps."
There's a sly humor in that statement, but it also points to a profound truth about the nature of time and how everything is in a constant state of flux. Even things we perceive as permanent are subject to change eventually.
And he captures that feeling so vividly in his writing, even in short snippets, like as they approached the memory of songs and music stopped at the moment the texture of its decay became visible to them. Sad how we all aged at that moment in time. Salt Air Summer, 1967.
It's almost as if he's saying that even memories, those seemingly timeless imprints of the past, are subject to the erosion of time, and that process of decay, of fading, can be a poignant reminder of our own mortality.
He was also quite the poet. In one haiku-like poem, he writes, "Not a leaf moves, and yet we all feel the cool breeze."
Such a simple image, yet it speaks volumes about the subtle, ever-present forces of change at play in the universe. Even when things appear still on the surface, there's always movement happening beneath.
And he plays with that idea of change in another poem. "This egg in brown leaves has a great secret of mine, that nothing changes."
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? On one hand, he's acknowledging the constant change we see all around us. On the other hand, he hints at some unchanging essence, some fundamental truth that persists despite the ever-shifting surface of things. It seems like he's inviting us to consider both the fleeting nature of existence and the possibility of something eternal.
I'm starting to see how these themes of change and impermanence might connect to his artwork, especially when you consider the title of one of his most famous pieces, "A Road Turns and Disappears."
That title alone evokes a sense of mystery, of journeying into the unknown, perhaps even a metaphorical representation of life itself. And when you think back to his quote about the smear between the whiteness and the blackness. It makes you wonder if that road represents the journey between those extremes, the gray areas where truth and meaning are constantly shifting.
And it's interesting how those ideas of change and uncertainty also appear in his thoughts on art and the creative process. For example, he wrote, "Art is not just images. Art for art's sake has become art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake."
Yeah, that statement really resonates with me. It highlights the tension artists often face.
Yeah.
The desire to create for the pure joy of it versus the practical realities of making a living.
Right, right.
It seems Camblin was grappling with that balance throughout his career.
Yeah, and you see that internal struggle reflected in other quotes as well. On the one hand, he writes, "The artist today is the only free agent. He is not committed except so much as he desires it. It's like he's celebrating the artist's freedom to create without constraints."
But then you have this other quote. In a time of consumer art, to make something truly unique in its intimacy, and yet projecting a solidity that won't be dismissed by superficial perusal, puts me in a bind.
Right.
That reveals a different side. The pressure to create work that's both deeply personal and marketable.
Yeah. It's almost as if he's yearning for that pure, unadulterated freedom to create, while also acknowledging the realities of the art world, the need to connect with an audience.
And that makes me think about his views on explaining art.
Or,
He wrote, the symbolists were right that in explaining something it was killed. Maybe he felt that overanalyzing or dissecting art could take away its magic,
yeah.
its ability to speak to us on a deeper level.
I think that's a really important point. Sometimes the meaning of a work of art lies not in a literal interpretation, but in the feeling it evokes. That
Mm.
sense of mystery, the unknown, can be so powerful.
Speaking of mystery and the unknown, let's dive into Road Turns and Disappears. The description in Zen and the Art of Enlightenment focuses on its visual elements. Imagine energetic brushstrokes and swirling textures that instantly create a sense of movement, almost as if you're witnessing change happening right before your eyes.
And then there's that bold orange border that frames the painting. It creates a striking contrast, doesn't it? Almost like a window into this dynamic, ever-changing world within the canvas.
The book connects the painting to some key concepts from Zen Buddhism, like Mu,
Okay.
which refers to emptiness or the void,
Okay.
and suchness, the idea of experiencing things just as they are, without imposing our own interpretations or judgments.
That's interesting because those concepts seem to echo Camblin's own fascination with change and impermanence. The void, in a way, could represent the potential for infinite transformation.
Exactly. And the video we mentioned, The Veil of Transformation, takes the analysis even further by bringing in the I Ching, an ancient Chinese text.
Oh, wow.
It specifically references Hexagram 49 Revolution, which is all about shedding the old and embracing the new.
It's fascinating how this one painting can be interpreted through these different lenses, drawing connections between ancient philosophers and Camblin's personal explorations. And the video even goes into the artistic style of the painting, mentioning expressionism and minimalism.
Right. Those terms might need a little explanation for anyone who isn't an art historian.
Yeah.
Expressionism, which emerged in the early 20th century, is all about conveying the artist's inner world, their emotions, and their subjective experiences.
Yeah.
Think bold colors, distorted forms, and expressive brushwork.
And minimalism, which came later, took a very different approach. It stripped art down to its essential elements, favoring simplicity, geometric forms, and a limited color palette.
In A Road Turns and Disappears, you can definitely see the influence of both. The use of impasto, where paint is applied thickly, and the swirling expressive brushstrokes clearly connect to expressionism. That rawness, that immediacy of feeling is right there on the surface.
But then you have that bold orange border, which seems to contain all that expressive energy within a very defined space. That framing technique feels very minimalist in its simplicity and its focus on geometry.
It's a remarkable fusion of different artistic approaches, which in a way mirrors Camblin's own approach to life and art. He wasn't afraid to blend seemingly contradictory ideas or styles. Remember his quote about science and magic meeting to create an intensely bright gray? That seems to be reflected in his art too.
Absolutely. And that eclecticism is evident not just in this one painting, but across his entire body of work. He experimented with so many different mediums, drawings, watercolors, even 3D constructions.
And remember that program cover he designed for De Cavalier at the Houston Grand Opera in 1975. That just shows his willingness to explore different avenues of creative expression. He didn't limit himself to one particular form or genre.
It's like he was constantly pushing boundaries, trying new things, always seeking new ways to express his vision. And he did it all while maintaining this incredible exhibition schedule, showcasing his work in galleries, museums, and even less conventional spaces.
Thinking about that prolific output makes me reconsider his, quote, communications. How wonderful and how sad. Perhaps he saw the beauty and limitations of expression, how art can communicate so much, but also fall short of capturing the entirety of human experience.
That's a really insightful interpretation. Maybe he was acknowledging the inherent challenges of communication, how we're always striving to express ourselves, to connect with others. But sometimes words or even images can only take us so far.
And perhaps that's where the power of art lies, in its ability to transcend those limitations, to speak to us on a visceral, emotional level that bypasses the need for literal explanation.
Right.
It's about feeling, experiencing, and connecting with something beyond words.
That reminds me of another one of his quotes: resist learning, learn to fail, learn to relax, learn to feel, learn how to really think. It's like he's encouraging us to go beyond rote learning, to embrace the messy, intuitive aspects of creativity and thought.
And that's what makes Camblin's work so compelling. He doesn't give us easy answers or neat conclusions. Instead, he invites us to join him on this journey of exploration, to question, to feel, and to discover our own meanings within his art. It's a dialogue, not a lecture.
It's about engaging with those gray areas, those spaces where science and magic meet, where the logical and the intuitive intertwine. And perhaps that's where true understanding, that sixth sense he spoke of, begins to emerge. Wow, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of who Bob Camblin was as an artist and a thinker. It's incredible how these personal writings add such depth to the picture painted by his biography and his artwork.
It's like those writings provide a key to unlocking deeper layers of meaning within his art. They give us a glimpse into his creative process, his struggles, and his unique perspective on the world.
And what stands out to you as we sort of wrap up this deep dive? What pieces of Camblin's puzzle are you carrying with you?
For me, it's that embrace of contradictions. He was logical, yet intuitive, a master of technique, yet also a champion of spontaneity. He seemed to seek solitude, but also share his work widely connecting with diverse audiences through his art.
Yeah.
He was deeply personal in his expression, yet tapped into these universal themes that resonate with us all.
It's amazing how he seemed to embody that concept of an intensely bright gray, finding that space where seemingly opposite ideas could not only coexist but also enrich each other. And he never stopped experimenting, always pushing the boundaries of his art, exploring new mediums and trying new things.
That's a valuable lesson for all of us, whether we consider ourselves artists or not, to keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones, to approach life with that same sense of curiosity and wonder that Camblin brought to his art.
And maybe, as he suggests, to resist the urge to over-explain or overanalyze everything, to allow ourselves to feel, to experience, and to embrace the mystery of it all.
Absolutely. He even reminds us we have nothing to fear but fear ourselves. It's a powerful statement about recognizing that our greatest limitations are often self-imposed. True freedom comes from embracing our whole selves, doubts and all.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to share one last quote from Camblin that I think beautifully captures his view on art and life. He wrote, "The real seeing has its own property of deception. It becomes a whirlpool of relationships going in all directions form the point of entering. It is like trying to look at a scratch on your cornea art, is the partial retention."
What a profound thought. It seems to suggest that true perception is never objective, that we're always seeing the world through the filter of our own experiences, biases, and interpretations.
And maybe that partial retention, those fragments of experience we hold on to, become the building blocks of our own personal narratives. And art, in a way, becomes a way of sharing those partial retentions, those glimpses into our unique ways of seeing.
It also highlights the deceptive nature of seeing itself. We think we're perceiving reality directly, but there's always more than meets the eye. There are layers of meaning, hidden connections, and subjective interpretations that shape our understanding.
It's a reminder that there's always more to see, more to understand, more to discover, both in art and in life. And maybe that's what makes the journey so exciting.
Before we say goodbye, why don't we turn that lens inward for a moment? Think about your own life, your own experiences. What partial retentions do you carry with you? What moments, images, or feelings have shaped your perception of the world?
And how has your seeing evolved over time? What deceptions have you encountered along the way? These are questions worth pondering, and who knows, maybe exploring Camblin's art further will provide some unexpected insights.
If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, you can find a wealth of images and information about Bob Camblin online. You might even be lucky enough to stumble upon one of his pieces in a local gallery or museum.
And if you're feeling inspired, why not try expressing your own partial retentions through whatever medium speaks to you? Remember Camblin's words, "We all are creative, but we lose our magic in understanding everything instead of knowing."
So go out there, explore, create, and experience the world with fresh eyes. Let that whirlpool of relationships guide you on your own unique journey of discovery.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin. We hope you've enjoyed the journey.
And perhaps it spark a few new thoughts and questions along the way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep seeking those partial retentions that make life so rich and complex.